This is the new MPC Live 3 from Akai, which is obviously not a minor update. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so let's dive into it and check it out. Akai has made a bunch of different MPC devices just over the last couple of years, but this third generation of the Live 3 is actually a bigger step forward than we've ever seen before from them. I mean, just the amount of buttons here is a little bit intimidating and kind of crazy, but if you know me at all, you know that I do love having my dedicated hardware buttons on a unit like this. The more, the better, pretty much. And just so you know, this product was sent to me by Akai for reviewing purposes and to test things out, but no money exchange hands. It's not like I'm getting paid. They don't get to have any input in the content of the video. They haven't seen it in beforehand. Nothing like that. All opinions in here are my own. Okay? Now, there's a lot of stuff to cover on this one, and I'm sure I'm going to make more videos on the new specific functions whenever I start using them more myself, but let's at least try to scratch the surface on most of the new improvements on this one. Let's also talk a little bit about whether or not this is worth upgrading to. If you have something like the MPC Live 2 since before, maybe an MPC 1, something like that, who is this actually for? The unit itself is kind of similar to the Live 2, with the same basic shape and form factor of things. This one obviously has way more stuff going on, but you know, there are similarities here. It comes with a built-in battery and a built-in speaker, just like the Live 2, but this one also has a built-in microphone over here. The microphone is decent for what it is. If you want to record some finger snaps or hand claps or whatever, I would not use this one for an entire vocal take, but I'm sure some people will. We have the 7-inch multi-touchscreen, we have 4 Q-Link knobs, built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, just like before. But there's a lot of stuff going on the inside here that's new and exciting too. We're now getting an 8-core CPU on the inside here, which is 4 times more than what the previous model had, so that's a big change. And that translates to an overall snappier kind of workflow in the system, and you're going to be able to use more plug-in instruments, plug-in effects, and heavy sample libraries and audio tracks than before. Also, 8 gigs of RAM instead of 2 on the last MPC Live, and 4 on the Key 61 and the MPC X, and also 128 gigabytes of internal storage, plus the fact that you still have an SD card reader and the option to install an extra SSD drive here in the bottom of the unit, just like on the other bigger MPCs. So when it comes to the actual computer inside of this that runs all the standalone capabilities and stuff, this upgrade is actually kind of huge for real. And I know that doesn't matter to everyone. It all depends on how you use the stuff inside of the MPC itself. If you're mostly using samples and drum shots, you're not going to need all this extra CPU and extra RAM, but if you want to be able to use all the different plugin instruments and plugin effects, having this amount of processing power in a standalone MPC is just not a bad thing. And who knows what's coming out in the future? Maybe even more CPU-heavy things will become compatible, and you know, that's what it is. Now, let's talk about the actual hardware here and check out some of the new things that we haven't talked about yet. First of all, the most striking one, of course, the new 16 drum pads over here. The drum pads now has something called MPC E functionality. We're going to talk about that too because it's actually kind of cool, but the pads themselves are full-size MPC pads, a little bit less thick than what we're used to, and they just feel way different to play. They're more sensitive, more responsive, and just feels way different. I don't mind this at all myself, I kind of like it, but I'm sure some people will hate it just because it's new and different. That's just what the world is, you know? The classic 4x4 grid of pads is iconic for the MPC series, and I guess this is Akai's way to keep that concept, but also changing it up a bit to add more functionality. Now every single pad has 4 different corners and is pretty much divided into 4 different sections. Now this whole MPC E functionality with the pads basically means more expressivity than ever. The easiest way to use this would be something like that. 4 different snares or rim shots on one single pad. We're basically triggering 4 different samples on the 4 different layers over here, 1 for each corner. Another example would be for this pad right here. This one has just 1 single sample, but still plays like that. And that's the MPC playing the same sample, but in a few different ways. We now have this entire articulation thing to set up, if we want to. Let's go to flam, roll, multiple bounce roll, or whatever that is. And we could also pick a sample like that, go into the mod matrix, and set up the x-axis to change the pitch, like that, or like that. And of course, that's not the end of it. You can use this kind of functionality for pretty much anything you want. So the routing possibilities becomes almost endless. You have this axis and the four corners, and you know, if you're kind of into all this, there's a lot of possibilities here. If you're not, you don't have to use any of this, of course. You can just assign 16 samples to your 16 pads and just make beats as always. But this is brand new from Akai, and I'm really excited to see what people in the community will come up with and how people will use this. I'm not sure how I feel about the look of the pads, the design like this, being lit up in the corners. Kind of don't love it, but it also kind of makes sense, just from a usage kind of standpoint, to get some visual feedback. But it's all subjective. Let's move on to the left-hand side and check out this Touchstrip over here that we also have available on the MPC Key 61 and on the MPC Studio controller. But we haven't had it on the MPC Live, so it's kind of new. But the functionality here is similar to what we have on the other devices. We can do pitch wheel, mod wheel, we can also change the different intervals for the note repeats, control the volume of the pad or the track, or we can assign it to one of the effects, in this case a filter, or actually use it to play notes or scales. And again, the list just goes on. You can assign a bunch of different parameters to this fader and use that together with the expressivity of the pads, record everything as automation, and, you know, go crazy with stuff like that if you wanted to. Next up, on top of the unit up here, we have this 16-step sequencer that's fully integrated with the rest of the sequencing system in the MPC. I've never been much of a step sequencer kind of guy myself when it comes to making beats on a device like this, but it's cool to have the option for the people who really loves that kind of stuff. And in this case, this layout should be pretty self-explanatory. 16 steps and different bars and beats like this. You can sequence a really quick drum beat without any issues at all. It also handles note values, and you can do chords and all sorts of things. You can also do ratcheting per step, probability per step, velocity changes, and you can do different tracks in different lengths and using stuff like that too. It just works. I haven't used it that much, but maybe I'll find a really effective way for me to use at least some of the steps in here, because sometimes it's faster to just put the notes on the grid than playing them in manually. Who knows? What's also really cool is that all of these buttons can be used for more stuff than just this sequencer kind of functionality if you want them to. Just hold set and then you have shift functions for all of them written underneath them, which is cool. In this case, I want my track mutes on these buttons, so whenever I play a track, I can just mute my drums, I can mute my sample, bring back half of the drums, or all of them. Or I could change this to track select, and in this case, track 1, track 2. When I'm working on beats myself, I tend to jump between my tracks kind of a lot, so having that functionality is important to me, but maybe you want to set this up to control your next sequence instead. Right now, sequence 3, sequence 1, sequence 2. Nice and simple. And this is something I really like seeing on here, because this allows me to develop a muscle memory of what button to hit at what specific point in time to take me to a specific function, without having to rely too heavily on the touchscreen. To me, that's a workflow improvement, and that makes my life easier, even though it takes a little bit of time to learn how to do things in the most effective way, because there are multiple ways of getting around the system. But to me, this is fantastic. Now, on top of all this, Akai also brought the entire clip launching system from the now discontinued Akai Force straight into the MPC Live III as an addition. You still have your different sequences, you still have the arranger, but now you also have a clip launcher. I'm still trying to learn this myself and find a way to incorporate this into my process, but it allows for a lot of modularity in terms of the arrangement of a track, in a way that we haven't seen before on an MPC. In this case, we have a few different takes of some drums, and we also have a sample and a bass line, and we can trigger one thing together with something else, on time or off sync, however we want to do things, and basically change between one set of arrangements to something else. And whatever you come up with in here in terms of arrangement, you can also record all this data straight into the normal arranger as MIDI data and as audio to keep working like that. This now allows me to record and save multiple takes of something I do on the pads without necessarily having to go back, undo that, and create a different sequence. I can just create another clip and keep working from there, and then have two different alternate takes to choose from. Essentially, it's just a different way of thinking about arranging loop-based music. This kind of system has been really popular in Ableton Live for years, and Logic has their version of it, and of course the Akai Force. So now it's also in here. Just one more way of being able to arrange your tracks. So, at least according to me, the theme here seems to be the flexibility of it all, right? There's a bunch of different ways to do kind of the same thing, depending on who you are and what kind of workflow you're looking for. But of course, when you're adding more functionality and more flexibility to something like this, it also becomes more complex and more complicated to learn for someone who's new to the system. There's no really right answers in how to do anything, because there are multiple ways of getting around the system. And that's a good thing and a bad thing all at once. And when it comes to the connectivity in the back, we have a dedicated headphone output, as well as 6 outputs and 2 inputs on combined XLR line jacks with phantom power functionality, so that's not bad. We also have a dedicated turntable input on phono jacks, 2 MIDI outs, 2 MIDI ins, 8 CV gate outputs, 2 USB-As, and finally a USB-C connection. That's really good. And that USB-C connection does a lot of stuff. You can do this entire multi-track system of MIDI tracks, you can record 16 tracks of audio straight into the MPC, or send up to 24 tracks from the MPC into a DAW. Kind of crazy stuff. Or maybe you want to sample something from any type of device with a USB-C connection, in this case my iPhone 15. Let's record. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Beat Review live stream. Every other Monday here on YouTube. There we are. Hello and welcome to another episode. It's that simple. Finally, USB-C, it feels good. It feels good. And when it comes to content, such as plugins, we also have this new visual EQ that's nice and responsive and sounds really good. There's also this new reverb called Reverb Pro. This new super algorithm for time stretching and also high quality stem separation. I'm gonna test that out for myself, for real, but it sounds way better than it used to. I mean, way better, so that's cool. I'm sure I'm forgetting about something. There's just a lot of stuff to talk about, both in terms of the actual hardware and the buttons and everything, and also the stuff on the inside that's been added and makes a lot of difference. And the biggest difference to me as a user so far is just the overall speed of the device itself. Whenever you load up a Rhodes instrument or maybe one of the string sounds, you do need to wait for a couple of seconds, normally. This time around, all the loading times has been reduced by a lot. There's just less waiting around for it to keep up, which makes a big difference. What also stands out here is how this is now a device that allows for different users to develop their own personal workflow in a different way than before. Some people will combine the step sequencer with the arranger, others will rely heavily on the clip launcher, and some people are going to use the expressivity of the pads with modular gear, I'm sure. I'm not saying that this is the perfect device for everyone, just because there are more ways than one to actually use it, but I think more people could adapt to a workflow like this. But of course, if you're happy with your setup and your workflow and the way you're making beats and music, more power to you, stick to that. But if you are a hardcore MPC user and you have been waiting for the next generation of MPCs to arrive, I gotta say that I think it's here, in the MPC Live 3. for sure. At launch, the MPC Live 3 will run the 3.6 version of the MPC software, which is also going to be available for everyone to download for one of the older MPCs. But it's not going to be able to do everything that I've shown here. The new Pro stem separation requires an 8-core CPU in order to run, so that's just a hardware limitation as it is. Akai is also going to have this Pro feature pack available as a separate purchase. If you have any of the older MPCs and you still want access to the Reverb Pro, the Visual EQ, Utility, Clips, CV Playground, Advanced Q-Links, and Super Time Stretch. So that's all going to be compatible with something like an MPC 1 or an MPC Key 37, but available as a separate purchase. That's all I know. At this point, I think it's time to wrap this video up. Thanks a lot for watching. This was my first little introduction and presentation of the MPC Live 3. There's going to be more videos about this one in the future, that's for sure. Thanks. Hit like, I guess. Subscribe. Whatever. Peace.